Hi, everybody. Good evening. My name is Dr. Christine Anderson, or Dr. Chris as my patients call me. If you are not familiar with me, I am a pediatric chiropractor of over 30 years. And I also am a mom of 3 adult children. They're now all adults. And I have to say, I am so grateful that they are not having to um, be children in a school situation in this time. I feel so blessed because I don't even know where to begin. And so if you are out there watching this live, if you have questions or comments or you want to chime in, go right ahead because these are unprecedented times. But I also feel like this is just the beginning of these changes that we're going to be seeing for our children, and not necessarily in a good way. Because what I am seeing and what I'm hearing from kids and from families and from parents is that kids in general are miserable. If they like to go to school before, they do not want to do Zoom classes. They're unhappy, they're in pain. It's stressful for parents trying to balance work and classes, and especially for younger kids that need more monitoring. It is just not the best situation that it possibly can be. I mean, there are some kids who are on Zoom classes for 6+ hours a day, and that isn't even counting homework. And the bottom line is that Zoom calls are really, I think, bad for the health and well-being of children. I really think that they are not serving them in any manner. I don't think kids are learning, and I think it's creating a lot of dysfunction and dis-ease in their body, which I'm going to talk about. And, the education system itself wasn't that great to begin with. In Los Angeles, which is where I raised my children, when they were growing up, there were fewer choices, but I was able to find situations that were very, not necessarily, they were in the public school system, but more in the way of parent involvement and a lot of different ways of thinking. For my older 2, they went to a grammar school where there was no homework. And then as my youngest got into schools, first he started out with a charter with no homework, but then got into a magnet where there was homework. And I would have to go in and say to the teachers, don't expect my child to do homework. There is nothing that's proving that this gets them ahead in life. And I think it just creates more disharmony in families, a lot of stress. And also I think it takes the love of learning out of children. So my children, when they were growing up, they were never made to do homework. If they wanted to, they certainly could. Projects, yes. If they had a test, they had to study, that type of thing. But until they got into junior high school, it just wasn't happening here. And now they are all adults. My daughter is a doctor, so she obviously had to go through further educational learning. And my 2 sons are self-learners. They decided not to go further with formal education, but instead continue to learn themselves and have self-interest of study of what they're interested in the arts and music. And, they're happy. So that's sort of where I'm coming from for people who don't know me. But in general, if, you don't want to take that love of learning out of kids. And if things are just drilled into them and they're learning things they're not interested in, and it's really just, they're being taught what society wants them to learn. There's a whole lot of things that go on for it. But if lectures are not great for children in a in-person classroom situation, then this is not going to translate well to Zoom calls. And I don't know about you guys. I've been definitely spending more time on my computer. Thankfully, as a chiropractor, I'm moving my body and I'm not on my computer. But I've been doing some more things like a lot of writing, a lot of prep for these YouTube channel shows I've been doing, also a podcast I've been doing. And it is hard. There was a 3-week period where I was on my computer a lot working on a course for chiropractors, and my eyes hurt. I was getting headaches. I was fatigued. My neck was hurting. A lot of things were suffering, and I'm an adult, and this is what we're asking of children. So this is just not the best way in general to be living our lives. And for children, for the most part, they need to have an experience. So a Zoom call is very one-sided. So you've got a child sitting there, they're looking at the teacher teaching, they're hearing what's being said. Usually they're on mute, so they can't talk. They're not getting the whole situation of the sounds and the feel and the environment of being in that situation. And for most kids, they are going to check out. And I don't know about you, but even sometimes when I'm on calls, even if I am interested, it's very hard to maintain interest in what's going on, just sitting there listening. So most kids need an experience to learn. They've got to touch things. I mean, come on. If a kid sees something, they want to grab it. They want to touch it. They want to feel it. It's unusual for kids to just sit back and go, yeah, okay, I'll just look at it from here. So I know with my own children, they liked to have a hands-on situation, and they learned better. So there was a 2015 Gallup poll that showed how disengaged American children already were before remote learning, with only about a third of American 10th, 11th, and 12th grade students saying they felt engaged in school. And that's older kids. So never mind the younger ones, where I just can't believe they're learning anything. And I have definitely seen this even when my children were going to school, not so much in grade school, but as they got into junior high school and high school, and I was still involved and would sometimes go in and do some things with the classroom, especially in junior high school. And it is amazing that just my experience from when I was in school, just how disengaged kids really have become. So if it wasn't great, it's even worse now. And I don't want to be all doomsday, because I do have some thoughts on how we can help improve this situation. And certainly if you guys are out there listening, please kick in. Now, besides kids, we've got teachers and we've got parents. So we've got a lot of moving pieces to this. And some of my patients who are teachers have also said to me they actually like the remote learning because there's less disruption from kids who were making trouble in class. So they feel like they have a better platform for teaching. And I could not believe when these teachers were telling me some of the things they had to put up with in a classroom situation now that I know back in my day would never have been tolerated, and even when my children were going to school. So it seems like there's just a whole lot going on that really needs to be reevaluated. And I feel like this is the time to do it. This is the time to create a whole new paradigm, a whole shift in how we are educating our children. So there can be an upside to this. The other downside of the Zoom calls for teachers is that they can't attend to as the kids that they would like to. It's very hard to make sure everybody's on the same page. So yeah, it's a difficult situation. And to make matters worse, kids are already spending too much time on electronic devices, and the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends no more than 2 hours of screen time per day for children. So what does that mean for children who are on Zoom calls for 6 hours a day, then they've got to be on more maybe for homework. And to make matters even worse, a lot of them, because they're not able to get together with their friends, are socializing on electronic equipment after the school day is done. So it's almost all waking time is spent on a computer. Okay. So speaking as a chiropractor, there are 3 things that we say in chiropractic philosophy that cause stress to the body: physical stress, emotional stress, and toxic stress. So I always like to start there because these are the basics. And yes, there's little branches of this, but these are the basics of what usually, when I delve into what's going on, there's usually one or more of these 3. So let's start with physical, because this is huge, 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 huge. Children, before any of this started, were already not moving their bodies enough. Again, I sound like an old timer now. When I was growing up, we were outside. We'd leave and not be seen until it was dinner time. I know times change, but regardless of, the fact that we have different situations, and certainly I did not grow up in a city, so that certainly helped. It's still the fact that children need to move their bodies for their brains to develop. That's irrefutable. You cannot deny we actually have the brain that we have in order to move our body. A lot of the real estate in the brain is for motor movement and sensory input as to what we're taking in. So if you've got a very narrow band of information you're taking in and you're not moving your body to stimulate your brain development, it is not going to be a good situation. And the thing is that we have nothing to show us what the long-term ramifications are of this. So time will tell as to what is going to happen to these children that are moving less and less, and now even less. So not enough movement. Even while children are watching Zoom classes, I've heard this from my patients, there's these rules in place that they have to sit still and not move their bodies while they're on the Zoom call. And that's incredible, especially if the classes are, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 minutes, some of them. That's just unrealistic. Not only is it unrealistic, it's not good for the child. So I have actually written notes for some children to give to the teacher so that they can move their bodies while they are on the Zoom calls. And here's are some of the recommendations. They can get a ball that they can sit on and then they can bounce. And I mean, not crazy bouncing, but just moving their body, shifting their hips side to side, whatever. Even being on a mini tramp and just sort of bouncing a little bit. They don't have to, again, go crazy. I mean, they may, but that's a kid. A spinning chair so they can spin, or a swivel chair where they can move. There's also wobble boards they can stand on to maintain their balance. Because the other aspect of this, besides not moving their body, is that their eyes are fixated on a screen for a long period of time. And even before all this started, I would recommend for adults or children on a screen to look away from their screen as much as possible. And if a child is moving on one of these things, their eyes are going to be moving too. So they're not going to be getting as much fatigue and strain. And that's going to cut down on things like headaches as well. And this goes for adults too, guys. I mean, you can relate this, but especially for children. Kids now are not having any physical exercise, like PE classes, playground time, sports they used to play. So you've got to make sure that they're moving their bodies in between whatever they're doing that's sedentary. So in between classes, take them out and kick a ball around, or shoot some hoops, or go for a walk or a run around the block, or ride their bicycle, or jump on a trampoline. Even a little mini tramp is really great for getting the system going. And preferably get them to do it outside, because kids are going to become deficient in vitamin D. In the Northern Hemisphere, we're headed into winter. So what does that mean? No movement, no vitamin D, immune system is going to be compromised. Well, they're going to be more susceptible to whatever's going around. And I don't care if you're socially isolating. If your system is down, you're going to be more susceptible to whatever. And that's just the way it is. It's more about what's happening in our bodies than the terrain, because there is stuff all over the place. Movement is needed for learning. It's going to be helpful for keeping their health in check as far as obesity, which is on the rise in children. It's going to affect their development of their spine and skeletal structures. So their posture from sitting, right? So it's all caved in and they get in weird postures. Their core is going to suffer. That's going to affect their breathing and how much oxygen they take in. That's going to affect the development of their spine, which is continuing to grow into their 20s. Even long term, if they're not moving their long skeletal muscles, it can affect how much the muscles are pulling on the bones for bone deposition and growth, which then later on can even make them more predisposed to things like osteoporosis. These are all the things that kind of go through my brain. So if a child already has issues with attention and focus, or is diagnosed with ADHD or anything like that, I mean, really forget trying to learn with Zoom. It just is going to be virtually impossible and so stressful for everybody involved. All 5 senses are necessary and critical for that learning situation and human relationships and experiences, as I said. And you just can't replace that sensory environment in a classroom just with a Zoom situation. So, that's just one aspect to consider. Then there's the emotional, and this is huge. So going to school for a lot of kids is a social experience, right? Yes, they're there to learn. Yes, but even in that learning, they're learning, how to maybe sit for a certain period of time. All school-age children should be able to sit for 15 minutes and have attention. So they're learning how to do that. They're learning about cooperation. They're learning stuff on the playground about taking turns and, what happens even if they feel bad, being picked for a sport and being picked last. Okay, that's a learning curve. It's all critical for their childhood development to have those interactions so that they can learn about themselves, how to modulate their behavior. Because if they aren't able to do that in this appropriate time, what is this going to create as they get older? I just cannot imagine. And then you have those close friendships and the personal, relationships that they develop with their peers and their teachers, people they look up to. All that kind of stuff makes part of their day. I mean, seriously, when I would ask my kids, what was the best thing when I would pick them up from school? What was the best thing that happened today? It was usually, PE or recess or something like that. That's like the best time. And they get to move their bodies, and then they get back into class and they can think better because they've had that outlet. They've had a release of stress, and then they can get back and be ready to learn. And this whole situation of being on mute, that's basically telling them, just shut up and sit there and listen. And it's just not going to do it. This is increasing depression in kids. It's isolating. So they can maybe see on a Zoom call their friends sitting there, but they can't interact with them. They have to wait till the day is over for their classes and then get back onto their computer equipment to interact or play a game or something like that. So it's just, again, another isolating instance. And this whole message of, be afraid of people is the message we are telling them. And even some kids might have anxiety about being on camera with the Zoom call, or they're going to lose their love of learning because they dread getting on that computer in the morning and sitting there and zoning out because they just cannot learn that way. And I have had a lot of instances where kids are acting out because they can't verbalize what they're feeling. They don't understand what is going on. Why can't they be with their friends? Why can't they go to school? And they just don't have these words to understand what they're feeling. And so they act out. And I can't even say that going to school in this situation is even any better, because kids are being isolated from one another. So in other words, their friends sitting right there, but they're in some pod and they can't go and talk to them. They can't hug them and touch them and wrestle with them and, play with them, which is what kids want to do. So I can't even say that going into a school situation is even better than being on Zoom. It's just not good one way or another. And then, of course, there's the whole stress of parents either trying to work at home and trying to help their kids on the Zoom, or the parents need to go into work and the kid is home. And what are they going to do? How are they going to manage everything? It's making it very, very difficult. One other aspect of this is our development of our brain with hemisphericity. So the right side of the brain comes online first. And this is our social emotional side of our brain. It's our big picture, it's our emotional side. And we need to develop that in order for our left brain to develop, which is more the linear, logical, IQ sort of thing, intelligence side. But if you don't have a good balance and a good connection, and one side is more prominent than the other, then there's going to be difficulties, either behaviorally or academically or socially, something like that. Something is going to give. And I've also seen there's some kids with social issues and anxiety in social situations who are actually liking the Zoom situation, but that's not necessarily good because they get comfortable in their little bubble. And again, they're not challenging their brain enough to be able to then be integrated into society. And that's not necessarily a good thing. All right, let's talk about this other topic of toxicity. So one of the things, of course, being tied into computer and an internet situation or Wi-Fi is exposure to EMFs, electromagnetic frequencies. And I have been talking a lot about this. I've done some podcasts on the Your Baby's Brilliant Brain podcast, not broken, brilliant, where we had special guests on, my daughter and I. And this is a situation that we need to address because internet Wi-Fi is not going to go away. We don't necessarily want it to, but there are a few things you can do to mitigate your child's exposure to EMFs. Number one, hardwire the computers, especially the one they're working on. But if you are working at home, same thing. So you can hardwire your computer and turn off the Wi-Fi. That way you're getting less exposure. Turn the Wi-Fi off at night completely to stop as much exposure close to you, and get all the electronics out of the bedroom. No phone, no computers, everything gets out of the bedroom at night for better sleep. The other aspect is the blue light that's coming off the computer. So getting them some blue light blocking glasses is going to be helpful for eye fatigue, for the eye health itself, and also the blue light can stop melatonin production at night and affect their sleep. So that's another thing that you can do. And the other aspect is the dopamine production. So the internet and what goes on releases something called dopamine in the brain, and it is addictive. So there's definitely an addictive nature to being on the screen, and it can kick in. So let's just say the child has a break from school, but they get back on the computer to go search on YouTube or play a game or, whatever. So make sure that they are taking the breaks that they need to take, and try to figure out a way to have your children socialize other than being on screen time. So, there's a lot of information out there about what is happening with the situation going on, and children are not affected. Healthy children are not being affected by what is happening in our world right now as far as illness and death. This is just not something that is affecting them, which is, again, frustrating because we can be affecting their long-term health situation for something that in the short term is not affecting them health-wise. The chance of them dying is just so negligible. It is unbelievable, because we are creating more of a health crisis situation by what I term, the cure being worse than the actual disease, the cause of what's happening. And studies have shown that children are not infecting or being a source of infection for older people, such as teachers. So do your homework. If you need more information on that, I can help you with it. But the other aspect of toxic too is if your child is going to school, a lot of what I'm hearing is that they're doing a lot of spraying and cleaning using toxic, harsh chemicals, which can create major problems and health issues, whether it be from respiratory or hormonal or the toxic aspect of later on creating other issues with possibly cancer. So we have to make sure that we're not making the situation worse. All right, so another type of solution that you could create as a parent listening to this is looking at how children learn and how better to create, if they're going to do an online situation, making it so that it is something that your child is going to benefit from in the long term. So this might look something like getting together in the morning for a discussion about what's going to happen in the day as far as a project-based type of thing, or what that child is going to do or be involved in, or a discussion about what the kids are interested in and how they would learn. So rather than a teacher getting up there and teaching, they're more like a coach where they are creating a plan or helping the kids make a plan to then put into effect for the day. So the kids might get together via, a group of kids to help create a project, like a PowerPoint presentation or a film or, whatever. So they're working on something collaboratively, and then the teacher can have assigned times where they're working with a small group of children, one-on-one almost, to make sure that they're getting what they need throughout the day, so that the child is then spending time off screen, either reading or creating the project, or even if they're on the screen, it's more of an engaging situation where they're doing some research or they're making a PowerPoint or a film or that type of thing. So this is, more of a project-based, hands-on way of learning that is going to be a better type of situation for everybody, especially for kids as they get older. It might be a little bit more difficult for a parent supervising a younger child. But the other good way is to actually have that child teach. So I know for myself, when I am teaching, I have to really know my subject well. So having the kids get together and almost teach each other would be a great way to make sure that they are engaged, and they'd be teaching about a subject that they know or love or that they want to learn about. These are just some ideas. These are just some thoughts on my head. You guys may agree or disagree, but something has to change. I'm seeing kids coming in pain. I'm seeing them come in, and physical pain, which children usually do not, but physical pain, neck pain, back pain, headaches. I'm seeing kids who are just checking out and who are having emotional issues. So try to get your child involved with their learning process and see if they might come up with some solutions, right? I know that if I had my children in school right now, I don't think, I know it's hypothetical because they're grown, but I don't think I would be going along with this agenda that they have set out with how they're teaching with the Zoom classes. And I know it's easy enough for me to say because I'm past that. But believe you me, when they were going through school, I had to be their advocate for what I thought was going to be best for them. And it was not always the easy way. It was a lot of involvement. It was a lot of sometimes meetings to make sure their needs were met. Sometimes things had to be changed, programs within the school. So I have done my due diligence, and it is not always the easy way in the beginning, but if your goal is to have a happy, healthy child, sometimes you have to step up and do it. It might mean that you have to homeschool, literally using a homeschool program. And I think those are a step up from what's going on with the Zoom calls, because these programs have been around for a while and they're usually project-based and kid-centered. And they also have ways of socializing with kids meeting up together. So it doesn't mean that your child is going to be isolated sitting at home doing this work as well. All right, that's it. That's my 2 cents on what's going on with the online classes. So let me know what you think one way or another. Let me know if you have any ideas of the situation. Although I'm hopeful this will end soon, I seriously have my doubts that anything is going to get back to normal anytime soon. Because as things start to change and shift and people normalize the situation, then usually things don't go back to the way they were. So let's elevate and make things even better. All right, have a great evening, and I will see you next time.